It's a show all about the BC craft beer industry. Today, Bridge Brewing out of North Vancouver as well. Brad Calkins, who is the Chief Eating and Drinking Officer from Visit Santa Rosa. We'll talk California beers as well. We'll have a beer cocktail with Sean Layton. I'm Joe Leary. Join me for BC Brew on Tap. Welcome to BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV. A look, listen, and sip and taste of the BC brewing industry. North Vancouver is represented. This is the first time we've actually had North Van on the show. Kerry Dyson, the head brewer. David Brown, territory manager of Bridge Brewing in North Van. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. North Van. So when did North Van start? Who was first, or not who was first in, but when did North Van get on the brewing map?
Well, Bridge Brewing itself started as BC's first nano brewery. So at the time, basically husband and wife, Jason and Lee Stratton, our owners, they were looking, they love craft beer. They're looking to save a little money, kind of a side project. And I think it's like a 10-person bar. The goal was to serve about 30 growlers a week. I don't think they really, summer 2012, I don't think they really expected it to grow the way that the industry has the last 5 years.
I find that surprising because the blueprint has been written for years. I mean, look at everything that's gone on. Like, none of these breweries seem to be failing. Everyone seems to be a success. So why would there be any doubt that, well, it may not work in North Van? It's working everywhere, right?
Well, it started as very much a nano brewery, a tiny, you could barely fit in the tasting room kind of thing, and the expectation was well, we just need to sell enough to pay for the bills, but always you won't want to move up and we just recently moved into a new facility. We had to buy a warehouse space. We're getting a couple new 80-barrel tanks at the end of the week as well. So it's always, you have to move up and you have to keep up with the industry as well.
Okay, so you've got a couple of people that are committed that decide that they want to throw their hat in the brewing ring. You need to find a brewer, okay? Yep. And again, another brewer with a beard. What is with beards and beer? What's going on here?
I started growing this beard when I got into the industry, and I was just like, let's see how long it goes.
Because you wanted to feel like everybody else.
You got to fit in.
Got to fit in for it.
And we'll see how long it goes. But yeah, so far, yeah.
Okay, so you come from are you a home brewer background?
Yeah, I started brewing. I originally started brewing mead. My parents used to keep bees, so I would be brewing mead with the honey. And then when I moved out, they stopped keeping bees, so I started brewing beer instead. And yeah, I've been brewing ever since.
Now, David, from your perspective, we always talk about this because it's one thing to brew good beer, and Bridge certainly does. It's another thing to get it beyond the immediate neighborhood, because obviously in North Vancouver, I'm sure most retail wants to support the locals if they like the product. How do you get it beyond the bridge? What was the introduction like when you go across the bridge and people don't necessarily know about Bridge?
Especially in Vancouver, people are scared of that bridge. If you don't live in North Vancouver,
if you catch it at the wrong time, it's a horrible bridge.
It seems like this giant journey, but it's really not unless you're going at the wrong times. We're at a time right now where people are just really happy to try new things and continually try new things. And I think they waited the right amount of time, stayed nano, stayed small. We have a really, really strong local following in North Vancouver. I wasn't aware myself, being like a Vancouver boy, until I started coming across and working, just how strong the following is once you go over there. But they moved January 2015, which I think was a great time. Basically like 5 times the capacity have started to be able to move across, and the good thing was to have a good core, a solid core. They had already won some awards. The beer was good, and the beer speaks for itself. So you can come into Vancouver, you can go to places where people have their local loyalty, and while people will stay local, part of craft beer is trying something new. I know when I go to a restaurant, I look for the first thing I haven't tried before.
Well, it's kind of funny because you and I were talking before we started the show. A lot of times, I look at the tap tells the story. The tap handle tells the story. And you guys have these really distinctive tap handles. And they're not cheap. Tap handles are not cheap, by the way, folks. Tap handles are not cheap.
Definitely.
But when people look for a new product, I think that whatever you have representing your product kind of helps the sale of it. Do you not agree?
Yeah, like absolutely. You always want to put your best foot forward and like focus on your branding and what you're putting behind, and make sure that it stands up to the product as well. Like you can have an amazing beer, but if you don't have any marketing behind it, then it's not going to do well anymore. Before you could kind of get by with either a good beer or good branding, and now there's so much competition. You need to have excellent branding. You need to have an excellent product behind that, because otherwise you're just going to kind of fall forward.
Let's talk about what's in the product portfolio. What is Bridge known for? Do you have a star beer?
Yeah, like definitely our blood orange. It's a blood orange wheat with bourbon, and it's kind of like what we definitely put our best foot forward with. So big American wheat ale, and it's got blood orange bourbon in there as well. So it's a patio beer, but it's definitely got a lot of flavor behind it. The other one that we're really proud of is our side cut, which is a Northeast IPA. It's what we're drinking right now, and it's a hazy Northeast IPA. It's in your face, a huge amount of like tropical hops coming through right on the aroma, and then like on the palate as well. And that's kind of probably our two like best known beers.
When you're pounding the pavement trying to get sales, do you get a lot of feedback from retailers? Like they're probably pretty open. It's like they might go, yeah, this one is really killing it. This one just isn't working. Like, is that important? Like, and do you take that back to Kerry as important feedback?
Oh, definitely. I mean, we definitely try to look at what our customers want to drink. It can be really interesting. You can go from one liquor store and go to the opposite end of the street, and the clientele will dramatically change. And you have to also have a diverse portfolio and kind of realize what people want at each place. And sometimes it can be very surprising that an IPA at one bar can be their top seller, and then another bar it just doesn't sell at all. But I mean, that's all part of like the fun of craft beer. Like the flavor spectrum is so diverse. There's something for everybody. As soon as somebody tells me they don't like beer, I just believe they haven't tried the right beer yet. Like,
okay, so I want to ask you as a brewer, is anything off limits? Like, I mean, there's graham cracker in beer. Could we ever have like a honey nut Cheerio IPA? I mean, is there anything that you would just go, no, that's beyond the pale?
I would say tentatively no, like because like I'm sure something will come up and somebody will be like, oh, I had this beer and it was awful and I've never wanted. But tentatively, no, I don't think anything is off the board yet. I'm very active in the homebrewing community as well, and somebody brought up a Shreddies beer. It was made with Shreddies, entirely with Shreddies, and it was mostly beer, but that's the thing that's really exciting. There's so much like innovation and creativity, and people like willing to like really push the barrel of like what is beer and like what you can do with it. So I would say I'm sure there's some things that don't work at all, but for the most part, like if it's done well, if there's very intentionally crafted, like you can have some really eclectic, interesting beers.
So there could be like maybe a PB&J flavor down the road. You never know.
Wouldn't put off the board. Yeah.
Wouldn't rule it out. Tell us about Bridge Brewing, the tasting room in North Vancouver.
Well, we moved from that nano brewery January 2015, and we have a really nice space now. We've just upgraded to our lounge license. We added a patio, and we just started selling food actually about a week ago. We have some fantastic tacos, and it really adds to that experience. I mean, a lot of people, it's almost like having a home sports team. If you have like that local brewery where you can go and you can call it your own, you can go and you can drink at, that's how you create loyal customers. I think it's a really important part of craft beer, is not just getting it at the store, getting it at the bar, it's visiting, it's meeting the people, it's getting that hands-on experience, and what it sets apart from like the multinational companies. Like,
nice to represent North Vancouver. So, Kerry, David, pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming down.
Thank you very much.
There is more BC Brew on Tap on Shock coming up.
Host hair services for Joe Leary and BC Brew OnTap, provided by Bailey Murphy of Avant-Garde Hair Studio in Yaletown at 1075 Mainland Street. For a list of services, call 604-688-1986 or online avantgardehair.com. Location services for BC Brew OnTap, provided by Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. For a list of locations, visit mahoneyandSons.com.
Welcome to BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV. As we explore the origins and the history of the BC beer scene, we would be remiss if we didn't look a little further down the I-5 on the west coast of North America and see where this whole thing started. Our guest is Brad Calkins, who is the Chief Eating and Drinking Officer of Visit Santa Rosa. That's actually what it says on your business.
That's what it says on my business
So
card.
that's exactly your title. Now, Brad, I met you a few months back, and we were talking about the beer scene. You were up here promoting beers out of California.
Correct.
We connected. We thought, you know what? Where you are now, that gave birth to where we're at in the local beer scene. Give me an idea of the history of the California beer scene.
Yeah, it really did start in the San Francisco Bay Area, going back to 1965 when Fritz Maytag bought Anchor Brewing in San Francisco. That was really one of the very first craft breweries. And then in 1977 in Sonoma County, where I'm from, New Albion was created, and that was considered the first microbrew of the time. And then 83, Mendocino Brewing was the second brew pub in the country. So a lot of history going back to those times. But just like you, we're seeing a renaissance, just like here in BC, where half our breweries are now 1 to 3 years old, and they're trying all these different styles.
So if you go back in time, and again, you were telling me that you're originally from Chicago.
Correct.
Okay. But when you look at brew in the U.S. and what we've sort of followed suit with up here, you know, when you think of U.S. brew, I guess Anheuser-Busch is probably the first name that comes to mind. So when the smaller guys started opening up, how did the bigger guys respond? And how did the consumer respond?
You know, for us, it really didn't happen, the response right away, because some of our breweries are 20 years old and the bigger guys didn't care. And it wasn't until recently, with all these other breweries and craft breweries opening up, that they really started thinking about it.
So, Brad, when one first of all thinks about, you know, the U.S. beer scene, probably Anheuser-Busch and Budweiser is one of the first names that comes to mind. So, when all of a sudden these microbreweries or nanobreweries started opening up, what was the response like from Joe and Joanne drinking public? Was it immediate? Did they respond well to craft beer, or did it take a long time to develop?
Oh, they responded very well. Quite a few of the breweries in our area and some of the bottles they brought were actually founded in 95, 96, and 97. So you have quite a few older craft breweries. There wasn't the big breweries around, and they didn't care as much in our area. So Joe and Joanne loved to come in and try the different beers, especially the West Coast IPAs. That's what quite a few of our breweries were doing, and it was different that they couldn't get anywhere else.
Now, I got a question for you. I've been to, and I actually enjoy spending time in, you know, little taverns in small town USA where, you know, you can get a bud for $1. Uh-huh. You're not getting a craft beer for $1 in these places. So does the average consumer go for price point, or they go for quality?
For our area, it really is about the quality, and it's because it's the wine country. You know, we have 400 wineries, we have a lot of the food scene, so that really created the craft beer scene. So people were a little bit used to paying slightly more than average for that drink. And they wanted the quality. They wanted something different.
Okay, so tell us about the California beer scene then. What are some of the standouts? I mean, obviously we know Lagunitas, but what are some of the Russian River, is it that...
Yeah, Russian River. Pliny the Elder is a year round, and we just finished Pliny the Younger. That finished just a week ago, and that was long lines. That brings people from all over. I'm sure people from BC were down, and all over Canada came down to stand in line.
Both of which those brands we talked about are available here in British Columbia. So I guess there is a fair degree of beer tourism. I know when Americans come to BC, yeah, they probably, if they see something on tap they're familiar with, they might migrate towards that. But by and large, they want to try something they don't know. And I think comparatively, if BC people are going down to California, it's like, oh, give me one of those. What is that?
Yeah, you know, that's exactly what happens. We see a big difference between our beer tourism and wine tourism, which is when I come up here, it's the same thing. People want to try something different. They're not looking for the comfort zone. They want to try what's local. Well, when I came here, the first thing I said when I got to the bar was, okay, what's local? What's new and different?
I was going to say, because there are a couple of brands in this bar at Mahoney & Sons that you're familiar with from the States, but you bypassed that. You went, no, give me one of these. So, okay, when it comes right down to it, what do you think lures people to craft beer? Is it the fact that it's just such a growing industry that they kind of feel like they're missing the party if they haven't tried something?
You know, I think it's really what they're looking for. They come educated. It's a little bit different than our wine scene is. The people who are coming for the wine don't know exactly what they're looking for. Those people coming for the craft beer, the visitors, they're coming here asking for specifics. And I've seen that when I've come up here a couple times into Vancouver to try the BC breweries, and I ask around. People know what they want to tell you, and they want to share with you their favorite craft and local breweries.
I have said to people, and not to denigrate the wine industry at all, but I think BC, or at least in BC here, beer is the new wine. So wineries were like growing rapidly, and I'm sure they are still growing, but nowhere near as much as the BC beer scene is. Is it kind of similar in California? Because when you think of Napa, certainly that's the epicenter of wine. Has the wine industry kind of taken a little bit of a backseat to craft beer, or is there a parallel there? What do you think?
You know, as they say in the wine business, it takes a lot of good beer to make good wine. So a lot of the winemakers, they want to have that beer, and they want to try it and drink it when they're not drinking wine. I don't think it's taken a back seat. I think it's just become more popular.
You represent Santa Rosa County.
Santa Rosa City and Sonoma County.
Okay, and how many breweries are there in your vicinity, and how big is your vicinity?
We're almost up to 3 dozen breweries. And just like BC, though, most of those are the newer and up-and-coming, 1 to 3 years old. Yes, we do have quite a few that are the 20, 17-year-old, but most of them are the up-and-coming 1, 3 years. Most of them are experimenting with different beers and different styles.
And of course, in your job, you stay on top of this. Are there still more springing up? Is it still growing?
Oh yeah, there's another one set to be open. We're just waiting every day, waiting to knock on that door to go in and try it. We can't wait.
Do you think that it'll ever get to a point where it peaks and ebbs, or it'll maybe taper off a little bit? I mean, it's not going to stop. We know that, but it can't continue to grow at the rate it's growing. At some point, there's got to be enough already, right?
You know, but that's the same thing we said about coffee. And now there's coffee in every corner. So I think it's the good quality beer, and people, as long as they can pay that extra few cents or an extra buck for it, or a Canadian dollar for it, or whatever it is, they're going to want that.
Okay, just briefly, if somebody is heading down to California and you want to recommend 1 or 2 beers that they got to try, what do you say?
Well, you have to stop by Russian River for Pliny the Elder. I mean, Vinny, who is the brewmaster, was the first one to do the double IPA in '94. So that's a classic West Coast IPA style.
Okay, and you know I'm an IPA fan, so I'm going to enjoy that. Is that what you're saying?
Okay. And we got some Racer 5 from Bear Republic, and actually brought a seasonal, the Racer 15, so something a little bit different too.
A pleasure having you on the show, Brad. Thank you so
very much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Brad Calkins is the Chief Eating and Drinking Officer of Visit Santa Rosa. Visit santarosa.com. There is more BC Brew on Tap on Shaw coming up.
Host hair services for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap, provided by Bailey Murphy of Avant Garde Hair Studio in Yaletown at 1075 Mainland Street. For a list of services, call 604-688-1986 or online avantgardehair.com. Location services for BC Brew on Tap, provided by Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. For a list of locations, visit mahoneyandSons.com.
Welcome back to BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV from Mahoney & Sons at Canada Place. My guest is Mr. Sean Layton. Now,
thank you, Joe.
The title below the name on the screen is going to say bartender, but that's like saying Van Gogh is just a guy that paints. This guy is bartender. What are you, bar star? Like, what are you in the? You are the guy.
I like to say bartender, but thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
I've worked in many great bars and
Yes, you
worked
have.
with many
Yes, you
great
have.
bartenders.
And your reputation precedes you. And I wanted to have you on the show for so long because whenever we do a beer cocktail, I've often thought, what would Sean Layton do? Because you know your beers, you know your spirits, and you know how to bartend, and you've been doing this a long time. So start off with, what are we looking at today? Like what when I asked you to come on the show,
yes,
I said, okay, Sean, go nuts. What was your first thought?
So when I'm drinking beer cocktails, first of all, I try and keep it fairly simple. Try and go with classic recipes and kind of twist them a little bit. And at the end of the day, it needs to be, I think when you're making any good cocktail or any good beer, it's something that you want to have more than once. So when I'm making beer cocktails, it's something that isn't going to maybe be too crazy and out there. It's more of what am I going to have 2 or 3 of.
Now, as a bartender, when someone says like surprise me, is that an open invitation or?
Yes, absolutely. But I'll try and get a bit more out of them, seeing what they're in the mood for, because not everyone necessarily wants an old fashioned. Right. Not everybody wants caipirinha. So you got to kind of find out what those people are in the mood for.
I know your background, Sean, and I know that you're quite capable of like taking a couple of different spirits and a couple of different garnishes and making something wonderful and shaking or spritzing or doing whatever.
Yep.
But when it comes to beer, does that add a different dimension to it?
It does a little bit, but I think it also opens up to a lot of opportunities. Once again, it needs to be something that I think has to be a little bit refreshing and can't be too heavy on the booze or too big of a beer. It's got to be something that, is sessionable at the end of the day.
Okay, so let's start off with the beers you've chosen. You're making 2 different drinks, I understand, correct?
I'm making 2 drinks, and we're happy that our friends from Strange Fellows gave us some of their wit beer, the Jongler Wit. It's a great beer. It's fruity. It's got high effervescence. So it's going to go very, very well with this drink that's going to be like a Pim's Cup, which you're going to see very shortly.
Okay.
And then also we've got a collaboration beer that's between Daggerad and Steel and Oak. It's called the Suburbs. They're both in the suburbs.
And they've made an IPA, which is, I believe, their first
for them is quite new. So for a second drink, we've got, I guess, a play on a margarita, but it's going to be mezcal based and it's got a bit of spice to it. So we're going with a bigger beer. So this is a East Coast style IPA. It's a collaboration between Daggerad and Steel and Oak, which they don't do a lot of IPAs, those guys. So very special beer. It's called the Suburbs. They're both located in the suburbs, so I think it's going to work really well in this drink.
Okay, so I'm glad to have you here, Sean. I'm looking forward to seeing you work. Let's go ahead.
All right, let's do it. 1 sec.
Whoa, what's going on here, buddy?
Well, you got to put the apron on if you're going to go to work.
That's some kind of apron, though.
Yeah, so I have a friend, Will. He's got a company called Search and Rescue Denim, and they do custom aprons for all types of trades, mechanics, tattoo artists, bartenders.
Nice kit.
We're going to start
so
first with a beverage that's like a Pim's Cup. So we're using Long Table Gin. So it's local gin. Long Table is a great distillery downtown Vancouver. This is a cucumber-based gin.
Yeah.
So we're just going to throw that right in there, an ounce of that. All right. Now, just for a little bit of fruitiness, this is elderflower syrup. So we buy this. This is from a company called Giffard. Beautiful syrup. Keeps long in the fridge. This is a little bit of mint.
What was that? What was
that it's just going to wake up those flavors.
Wake it up, okay.
You don't really want to muddle it or anything like that. It'll make it too bitter. And then we're putting some Pims. So the classic Pim's Cup that they drink at Wimbledon.
Okay.
This is a gin-based liqueur. And just, half an ounce of that. So we've got, some fruity, some floral ingredients, very refreshing. It's all going to pair well with the Strange Fellows.
Okay.
This is a Belgian wit, high effervescent, very, very sessionable. Here, the key with any drink, especially beer drinks, make sure you get lots of ice in there. Because you don't want it to melt and get watered down.
Yeah, sure.
And I brought you a special glass.
I noticed
this one's got a dancer on it.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so next up, we're going to go a bit more bold, a bit more spicy, a bit bigger. So we're doing a take on a margarita, but we're making it with mezcal. So a little bit more spicy, a little bit more smoky. This is Siete Misterios, really cool brand of mezcal. I'm going to throw an ounce of that. So this one's, a bit more of a booze-forward beverage. We need a little spice in there. So this is Ancho Reyes. This is an ancho chili liqueur. This is from Mexico. This is just going to add a little bit of spice. Ancho also has a little bit of kind of chocolatiness to it. I think that's going to go really nicely with the IPA. We're going to finish this drink in a second, so just remind me.
Okay.
A little bit of lime. Always use fresh juice. These juices are great. You could either plop it right in there like that, or you could leave that on the side. I think it looks a little better, like so. So that's half a lime. And we're going to top that off.
Well, I was gonna say you don't have an opener, but wait a minute, you got your handy apron on and you got everything, right?
All the tools.
Okay.
Okay, so this is a collab beer called the Suburbs, Daggerad and Steel and Oak. So just nicely, and as you see, there's salt on the side of the glass. I often like to put salt in beer drinks. Salt and beer go really well together, and it's just going to bring you back and get you keep drinking. So to finish this one off, we've got some cucumber. Basically, whatever you have in the fridge, just throw it in there. It's a Pim's Cup. It's meant to be fun. You could kind of have a garnish bar at home if you wanted to, have people dress their own. You know, it very, very
Or I'll just have
simple.
you come over to my place and make some
Or
drinks.
I can do that. So let's top
Yeah.
that up again. So we want the drinks to be full. And you could even serve it with the beer so you have more at the end.
Sean Layton, you make it look so simple. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure. That is a wrap for BC Brew on Tap on Shaw TV from Mahoney and Sons at Canada Place. Enjoy all that BC has to offer in a glass on tap. But remember, please drink responsibly and always plan a safe ride home. We'll see you next time.
Clothing for Joe Leary and BC Brew on Tap supplied by Red Dragon Apparel. RedDragonApparel.com. For BC Brew on Tap, this is Mike Schaefer.